It's a pleasure to be here. As Paul mentioned, have a long association with the Naval Institute. I was blessed with my last tour on active duty to teach at the Naval Academy, a job that was sort of teed up by one Admiral Mike Mullen. During that time, I was able to get super close to the Naval Institute because I literally lived 50 paces out the side door of Beach Hall on Boyer Road at the Naval Academy. So my first novel was published by the Naval Institute Press. It was a work of fiction, which is, as you guys know, not something the Naval Institute Press does very often. So it's a very special time, and I'm very happy to be here. These gatherings do feel like a homecoming of sorts. So I'm also very happy to have this panel. And as I will articulate, I have known some of these gentlemen for many, many years, and I'm blessed to have them comment on this important topic. Now, in my capacity as the editor of military.com, I get to do some pretty cool stuff. And among those things recently was I embedded with a couple of different forces in Afghanistan last summer. And by last summer, I mean the summer of 2010. So I spent a couple of weeks with the 101st Airborne in Paktika province, which is very close to Pakistan, the eastern part of Afghanistan, at a couple of the combat outposts. So one of the first evolutions we did when we got to what's called Combat Outpost Yosefkel is we drove the provincial governor to a shura, which is a gathering of the tribal elders, in a place called Yayakel that is a major sort of commerce district. There's a big bazaar there, and so it's something the Taliban want to make sure that is not peaceful. So during that shura, there was a disruption outside, and the meeting was sort of summarily broken up. And so I went up to the roof of the outpost with some of the military guys, and there was a firefight going on. And so we, as our first exposure to being mortared and seeing rifle fire and that sort of thing, we did have one Super Hornet fly over, so that the fight stopped for about 30 seconds. And when they flew away back to Ike, it started back up again. So as an aviator, I was exceptionally proud of that performance. That's more a commentary on the ROE than it is, our strike warfare capability, by the way. This was about the time when General McChrystal had laid down some ROE that was untenable, and we saw some examples of that. But what I got to see was a couple of bad actors, and that's literally what it was. I mean, we label them as Haqqani Network, we label them as Al-Qaeda, we label them as Taliban, but what it is two teenagers from a local village with a mortar and a couple of AKs sets this thing in motion. So they're calling for overhead sensors, both unmanned and manned. They're energized KAOX at Kabul, where General Rodriguez was, and if you've ever been there, it's about the size of Mission Control in Houston, literally. Not to mention what happens back in Tampa. So two teenagers who are bored set in motion thousands, literally thousands of ISAF and American personnel and literally millions of dollars of hardware and software. So to my eye, that seemed a bit incongruous. Now, Admiral Mullen mentioned yesterday the difference between intelligence and knowledge, or I'm sorry, rather, information and knowledge, and I got to see some of that. So I'm going to ask the panel to make some sense of that. Now, the other thing, I'm talking about this war, and you remember Secretary Gates admonished before the QDR, the service chiefs and others, about next war itis. So I think what we're seeing now with the pivot that we've been talking about for the last 2 days, away from counterinsurgency and asymmetric warfare into the Pacific Rim threat and a more conventional threat, is we got to make sure we don't suffer from this war itis, right? So I'm sure that the panel will speak to where the priorities are going and what, in the face of this discussed yesterday budgetary situation. I won't rehash sequestration and the bogeys and all the things we're facing numbers-wise. I assume everybody knows what that landscape looks like. But I just want to make some sense of what looked to be sort of the boxes of tricks driving the reality to some degree. Now, Admiral Harvey recently addressed the Surface Navy Association get-together in Washington, and he sort of admonished the SysComs primarily about having this diffused chain of command and diffused responsibility, and he hearkened back to the days of Admiral Wayne Meyer when he was sort of the single point of contact to make Aegis happen. And let me quote him, or Admiral Harvey rather. Why have we so readily walked away from absolute accountability in how we deliver combat capability to the fleet? So, without any further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. Vice Admiral Hunt graduated from the University of Wisconsin in Madison. His first command was the USS Crommelin, FFG 37. From there, he went on to Crudesgru 2, also known as the George Washington Battle Group, where he was the operations officer for Admiral Mullen, and he had to put up with me as the CAG operations officer. Had a fantastic time. We fought the great war before the war with Iraq, also known as Operation Southern Watch. That was actually a very great cruise and a lot of good leadership there. And all the principles from there, and I speak of Joe Sestak, I speak of Boomer Stufflebeam, have gone on to both fame and infamy. We've all stayed very close, you know, I actually had a chance to talk to Admiral Mullen at his change of command, and he mentioned very distinctly that sort of cohort has very much informed his success from that point forward. So that's sort of the beauty of having a good tour. But I digress. Then Admiral Hunt was skipper of USS Philippine Sea and also Alpha Whiskey for Enterprise Battle Group. Also at that same time, he's assumed command, after that he assumed command of Carrier Strike Group 6, later commander of 3rd Fleet, and now he is Surf Pac. Admiral Hunt, your opening remarks, please, sir.
Well, thank you very much, and it's great to be back here on a panel with you. We've certainly got a lot of those midnight meetings together over the years, which is good. I take a look at the tooth to tail from a surface warfare perspective as kind of piece parts. And the first thing is, do we have tooth right? Do we understand what that is? And then do we have the supporting tail, if you will, that directly takes care of that future tooth because it is an important build. And so one of the things that we've been dealing with over the last decade or so is we came down in significant manning across the United States Navy is moving towards optimal manning, where we offered that we could cut back on our afloat billets, especially enlisted sailors at sea, and by ensuring that they had the right skill set, we could do by equally well with less. The truth of the story in there was that we were unable to match the proper NEC, if you will, fit. So if you go into the apprentice, journeyman, master level training, to get the right skill set at the right pay grade, to kind of deliver on that end. And so when we dropped the number of sailors down without having those skill sets match appropriately, we put ourselves in a little bit at risk. Now we've turned that tide, and I think leadership has picked up on that. Over the last year, we've plussed up 2,000 surface warfare enlisted billets. We're going to do again the same next fiscal year to the tune of about another 800 to 1,000. That puts us back in the right area. But it's important that we recognize where we've come from in the last couple of years and what we are doing right now to be able to sustain our combat capability at sea. And we've pushed ourselves, I think we've pushed ourselves too hard. We're turning the corner. We're not there yet. We can't take our focus off getting that tooth piece right at sea. Getting the right blend of our sailors with the right training out there is what gives us the resilience to operate in a contested area. So it's interesting, you know, as we talk about different things that have gone on the ground and what it takes to support that. I take a look at the challenges of being at sea, operating autonomously or within a strike group, and being able to sustain that capability with the proper manning, the proper training, the proper sparing, so that when we have a denied environment like we certainly could experience in the Western Pacific, we can continue to operate. It takes me to the second part. and that is the tail piece. So what is tail? Is tail, you know, the other 600,000 folks that support the United States Navy? Is it those that are not trigger pullers on ships or an aircraft at sea? I think sometimes we confuse those areas. And I would offer that key to what we do at sea is having the right mix of training, what I'll call enriching shore tours for our sailors when they bounce back ashore to where they continue to grow in their skill sets. And so my example or my areas of focus would be that tooth that is so very, or the tail rather, that's so very important to supporting us is things like our ATGs, our float training groups, our RMCs, our regional maintenance centers. That becomes a piece that I think we have missed over the last decade or so on what do we do to rotate our float sailors to learning and enriching tours ashore and back into the afloat piece. When we get that right, I think we will reestablish ourselves as a credible combat power that can operate in different environments and to continue to survive out there and fight through all the different challenges that we have. Self-sufficiency becomes incredibly important. That centers on our enlisted personnel. Admiral Mullen mentioned that yesterday. He said, you know, boy, if you're down to focusing in one area, you know, is it the toys, is it the things, is it the platforms, or is it the people? He indicated people. I put my vote into that category. We need to resource our folks properly at sea and in direct support ashore and make sure that we set them up to be good not only today but 5 years and 10 years down the road by giving them the right skill sets. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. Our next panelist is Vice Admiral Al Myers. Admiral Myers graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He was winged as a Tomcat Rio and had tours in a variety of sea and shore squadrons, including VF 101, the Tomcat RAG, where he had the assignment of schooling one Ensign Ward Carroll as a fledgling Tomcat Rio. See how it all comes back to me? That's how I'm going to run the panel here. He was skipper of VF 32, the Swordsman, and then had a deep draft USS Sacramento, had the carrier Kitty Hawk, selected for flag, and was Carrier Strike Group 8, the Eisenhower CSG. And then from there went on to be the Director of Air Warfare, N88, and a number of other DC assignments, and now is Air Pac. Admiral Myers, sir.
Okay, thanks, Ward. You know, it's a pleasure to be up here with this distinguished group. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of history with myself and Ward Carroll. And fortunately, he only remembers the good things. So if you ask him and he has anything that isn't positive to say, he's not telling the truth. I think when you look at tooth and tail, it's important to look at naval aviation and understand the landscape. And naval aviation has a lot to be proud of. Last 12 months, we celebrated our centennial. And in the centennial, we talked about 100 years of courage, innovation, teamwork, and we talked about the achievement of naval aviation over the last century. When you look at what naval aviation is doing today and the contributions overseas, we're flying half the combat missions in Afghanistan and about 1/3 of the close air support missions. We've got a number of CSGs that are in Fifth Fleet right now. You have the Lincoln and the Vinson CSG. You've got the John C. Stennis that's in 7th Fleet. Naval aviation is overseas. We're forward deployed. We have helicopter detachments on every ship. We have maritime patrol that's overseas supporting the combatant commanders. And I think that naval aviation is absolutely focused on CNO's objective of warfighting first. The effects of naval aviation, when you ask the combatant commanders, they can't get enough. It's critical, it's important, it's in high demand. Naval aviation is efficient, it's agile, and it's always in high demand. But naval aviation has to be efficient as well as effective in order to be able to survive and continue with all these budget pressures. When you look at tooth to tail, generally speaking, the tail represents about 40% of DoD spending. The tooth represents the operational commands and the people that support those overseas forces. When we talk about naval aviation, the tooth is also the pilot production, both at the FRSs, where we generate the type, model, series, air crews, and it also, when we talk about tooth, we look at our training command. And that's important because that feeds the tooth. When we talk about tail, we talk about some of the support staffs, we talk about MWR, we talk about some of the infrastructure that supports the tooth. Naval aviation's focus has been to make the tooth as efficient as possible. We know that we need to be effective. We know that absolutely the effects of naval aviation are in demand, but we've got to be as efficient as we can. And sometimes it's tough to measure because when you look at people, a pilot, an F-18 pilot, if he's in an F-18 or assigned to an F-18 squadron, the monies that the manpower support for that pilot is tooth. But as soon as he goes to PG school, as soon as he goes to a shore assignment that's outside of pilot production, then that becomes the tail. So it's important that we identify what part of the tooth are we trying to be efficient and what part of the tail and where can we find efficiencies. Beginning in PB-11 and PB-12, there was a lot of efforts in Washington to reduce the tail. And they reduced the tail in terms of OMAN, R&D, manpower realignments, and overhead. For naval aviation, what we did was we revalidated the flying hour program. We reduced in strength. We combined some staffs. And we actually were able to buy aircraft in a more effective and more efficient way by multi-years. Now, together, the Navy and the Marine Corps realized about $33 billion across the FIDP in these efficiencies. But for naval aviation, what that translated into was continued commitment to the Joint Strike Fighter, making sure that our P-8 programs, that we stay on track, that we keep the rotary wing aviation in transition. When you look across the flight line at naval aviation, we're a community in transition. And I think that we have a lot to be proud of. There's a lot of innovation on the flight line, and there's a lot of credit that we need to give our predecessors for putting us on a glide slope where we can continue to deliver effective combat power in the future. Our rotary wing community, we transitioned to the Romeo and the Sierra. When you look at the MH-60 Romeos, we're about halfway through the transition, and we'll finish up about 2019. When you look at the Sierras, we're about 80% through the transition, and we'll finish in 2015. So we're on glide slope. Hornets, Super Hornets, EA-18s, we're on glide slope, and we're finishing our production and acquisition of those aircraft. The VAQ-132 Scorpions did their first combat deployment in support of Libyan ops this last year. VAQ-141 did their first combat deployment assigned to the USS George Herbert Walker Bush. The E-2D is in transition. We've got the first aircraft that are at the Fleet Replacement Squadron. We're going to have our first deployment with the Blue Tails in 2015. And the P-8 is also in transition with the first deployment in 2013 with VP-16. Unmanned systems, and I know there'll be questions about unmanned systems. We have BAMS-D overseas. It just keeps delivering. We have the VTUAV and the Fire Scout that's currently on detachment with the Simpson. They deployed on the 17th of January, and they're going across the Atlantic right now with 20 personnel. We've got the U-class. We've got the X-47B. We expect that to be on the carrier flight deck in 2018. And of course, we have the new construction of CVN-78, which I'm happy to report. I was there less than 2 weeks ago. The ship is coming along marvelously. We expect the island to be delivered and installed in November. And we've got, I think, the year from this summer, about 18 months from now, she'll be in the water. She'll be floating. Now, there's a lot of challenges to deliver this efficiency, and so what Naval Aviation has done is we have recognized where the challenges are. The challenges are in areas like infrastructure, manpower, our programming, maintaining readiness, keeping all of these production programs on schedule, and then testing. But the way that we try to manage this within Naval Aviation is we collaboratively get the U.S. Navy, the Marine Corps Aviation, and the NAVAIR SysCom together in the Naval Aviation enterprise. And that collaborative forum gives us the data and the transparency to make good decisions. And that forum has given us the capability of delivering lots of efficiencies to date, and we're expecting more efficiencies in the terms of cost avoidance as we look in the future. Some of our future readiness initiatives across the FIDA have resulted in over $1.5 billion savings, and we can go into the Q&A in terms of talking about where those savings are. Our onboard discharge tank cost reduction initiatives have saved about $87 million per aircraft carrier over their life. The fleet readiness centers, they've surpassed the $1 billion goal in terms of reducing costs, and that's ahead of the BRAC schedule. And we've teamed expert civilians with our apprentice sailors at every opportunity to make sure that we can gain from the experience that we have in the commercial side, in the contract side, and leverage that in terms of dollar savings. And we've realized about $2.5 million in 2010 alone. Naval Aviation is focused as a leadership group and needs the transparency to make sure that all the combat effects that we're delivering overseas are delivered as efficiently as possible. I think that when you look at Naval Aviation and you look at some of the initiatives that we have in place, I think that you'll realize that when it comes to that portion of the tooth, that we're doing the best we can. We're not satisfied. There's more that we can do in the future, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral Myers. Rear Admiral Richard Breckenridge graduated from the United States Naval Academy in 1982, along with me. He selected nuke power. I was asked to please stay away from nuke power by Admiral Rickover himself. After a, these are the jokes, come on. After a series of tours and various billets in both boomers and fast attack submarines, he commanded the USS Memphis, SSN 691, that supported Operation Iraqi Freedom. He was commander of Submarine Squadron 4 that was responsible for 10 submarines representing all 3 attack submarine classes. Ashore, Admiral Breckenridge has been assigned to the Navy Postgraduate School in Monterey, Submarine Warfare Division, the Chief of Naval Operations Staff, served in the immediate office of Secretary of Defense, providing direct support to Defense Secretary Cohen and Deputy Secretary Hamre. More recently, he served as a special assistant to the Director of Naval Reactors and on the Joint Staff. He also served in the Deputy Director Submarine Warfare Division, N87, on the staff of the CNO from 09 to 011. He is now the commander of Submarine Group 2. Admiral Breckenridge, sir.
Well, thank you, Ward. Ladies and gentlemen, very grateful to be here. A true privilege. As mentioned, I'm the submarine group commander for the Atlantic fast attack submarines, and I report to Admiral Richardson, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, so he asked me to pinch hit for him. But more importantly for today, unlike my esteemed colleagues here on the platform, I hail from New London, Connecticut. And Saturday we had a 10-inch snowstorm, and the temperatures up there are evil. And so to be able to launch, to come to a conference in San Diego, I just can't thank the organizers enough for that. I would also like to acknowledge the conference organizers for just a tremendous conference, and it's been impressive in the short while I've been here just to see what has been accomplished and what's on stock as we go ahead. Very prescient, topic. The agenda clearly came out well before the new strategic guidance was issued, but you can see the parallels. They're almost eerily close. You sort of wonder who the sources were for the organizers. But I have 3 quick thoughts for you this morning regarding undersea forces and warfare way ahead as we talk about military tooth and tail. The first is your undersea forces have been historically lean, and that is certainly the case today. And these statistics are familiar to many, but we represent 7% of the Navy's manning. We have 15% of the Navy's budget, and yet we operate and man 25% of the Navy's combatants and 87% of our nuclear warships. Important to also mention our strategic deterrent leg. We carry currently over half the nuclear warheads in our nation's arsenal, and that proportion is going to grow to 70% as we implement the New START treaty ahead. So a very lean force that does a lot from the undersea domain, where we enjoy a distinct advantage, as compared to our adversaries. But historically, as I prepared for this panel, we've been about the business of getting lean, as mentioned by the other speakers, over the last 12 years. And starting in 2000, we've reduced our total end strength in the submarine force from 27,800 sailors to, in this year, 16,200 sailors, which is a staggering 40% reduction in our force over that 12-year period. It's important to note, at the same time, we maintain the same number of crews today that we essentially manned in the year 2000. So we have 91 crews when you look at our fast attacks and our dual-crewed SSBNs and SSGNs, and we have 91 today in 2012. So that type of reduction in strength, before efficiencies became cool, we were driven towards getting lean as a force. But the challenge we face as we look to the future is further cuts that are a matter of program of record. And so part of this topic is its temporal aspect. It's sort of warfighting now as compared to warfighting in the future. And what will that teeth look like? Let's forget about the tooth-to-tail ratio and getting more lean. The reality is the current program of record is we're going to reduce the current 55 attack submarines we have in our Navy to 40 in 18 years. So by 2030, we're going to go from 55 to 40 attack submarines. We're going to go from 4 dual-crewed SSGNs, not only cameoed in the Act of Valor, trailer that we got to see, but doing other important things with regard to land attack strike, to 0. So 8 crews there to 0 crews by 2030. And depending on, word that's, about to be promulgated, we're going to go from an SSBN force of 14 to 12 and to potentially 10 SSBNs. So in the course of the next 18 years, this is before any further draconian cuts that are going to happen as part of our nation's fiscal crisis. But we're going to go from 91 submarine crews today to 60. Those numbers that I mentioned to you is a minus 31 submarine crews. That's a part of our nation's program of record. And we're going to have to be able to engage in a more challenging global security environment with a much leaner warfighting force. And as I mentioned, 18 years to some may sound like it's quite a ways away. And a lot can happen, and we'll just worry about the next couple of years sort of with that very near-term vision that typically runs our military. But the PCOs, the prospective commanding officers for PCO Class 2030, are commissioned today. that, they are through their nuclear training, they're through their sub-school, and they have arrived to their first submarines. And so those 60 crews that I mentioned in 2030, that lean force that we're going to have, those ensign and lieutenant JGs are in our force today, and a few of them will be women that will man those ships in 2030. So the advantage that we have is a little bit of a head start. I mean, this is sort of the 7 years of famine are known. We know where this trough is, and it's not going to change. So what are we going to do about sharpening the focus? What are we not going to be able to do from the undersea domain that we have done in a more benign peacetime environment? So that's first point. We're very lean, and it's going to get leaner. Second point is the undersea forces are in the midst of a transformation to further sharpen our unique military value. And some may say that this transformation began with the design and the delivery of the Virginia-class submarine. And I have to tell you, as a Squadron 4 Commodore with the Virginia-class, now as the group commander with ownership of the Virginia-class, it's a tremendous change in our platform strategy. Not since the days of the advent of nuclear power and the USS Nautilus have we made such dramatic changes with the design of our undersea platform. We have built in flexibility and adaptability for the future. And as our missions, as our payloads, as our military effectiveness change, we have a great platform that has that built-in flexibility in its design. Some may say that the transformation began with the SSGN conversion, where we took those SSBNs and we used that undersea payload volume in new ways, soft and Tomahawk Strike as mentioned, but with potential for even greater use with that large open ocean interface. But I'll tell you that part of the transformation began this summer when the submarine force promulgated the design for undersea warfare. And this is a seminal document that really challenges sort of the root of who we are and what is the military unique advantage we're going to provide the nation in the future. And we'll talk about more of that in A2AD. But I'm sorry, in questions and answers. But I want to mention that A2AD is central to recasting what kind of military influence we're going to have with the access that we'll have ahead. And so the third point is just that. As we look at air-sea battle, as we look at the new defense strategic guidance, as we look at the challenges that we're going to face in the Asia-Pacific region and others that replicate this A2AD push to hold our forces and our influence out, the submarine force, and this is an important point, it's a different prism as we look at A2AD from the undersea. We're going to have that access. The real challenge for us is what kind of influence are we going to have with it? And if you look at sort of our king capabilities today, and that's anti-submarine warfare, covert ISR collection, Tomahawk land attack, will those be the right tool set to be disruptive and to exploit the asymmetric undersea advantage that we're going to have in the future in these A2AD environments? And so, we're reshaping. We're beginning to look harder at what kind of roles and missions that we're going to have in the emerging global security environment. And I, too, look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Breckenridge. The final panelist is Brigadier General Daniel Yu. He and I just met today. But it was a good meeting, I think. I'm very excited about where the relationship's going to go. He's a graduate of Arizona State University. After platoon leader tour with the 2nd Battalion, 9th Marines, he served with the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion, 3rd Marine Division, where he was the Reconnaissance Platoon Commander, Reconnaissance Company Commander. He transferred later to Headquarters Marine Corps, where he served as the Action Officer in the National Plans Branch Strategy and Plans Division, and as the Administrative Assistant to the Deputy Chief of Staff, Plans, Policies, and Operations. Few tours later, he commanded the Infantry Training Battalion School of Infantry East, and then he was a National Security Affairs Fellow at the Hoover Institute. After a stint in the Pentagon on the J-3, he assumed command of the 4th Marine Regiment, 3rd Marine Division, and deployed to the war in Afghanistan, where he also did the laudable job, something I was able to witness firsthand as well, of training the ANA. After that, he served as the Commandant of the Marine Corps' Military Fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations in New York City. Last summer, he transferred here and assume command of Marine Corps Recruit Depot San Diego and the Western Recruiting Region. General Yu.
Thank you, Ward. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, or good morning, I should say. To Admiral Breckenridge, I guess it's great to be in San Diego, unless you're a recruit going through the depot right now. So the weather's good here, very conducive for a positive outlook here. As I mentioned, I'm the CG over at the depot right next to Lemberg Field, and I wear 3 hats there. One is my recruiting hat, where I'm responsible for going out and finding, recruiting and enlisting qualified fellow Americans, males and females, that have the moral, mental, and physical capability to potentially be Marines. The second piece is what I do at the depot, and that's the transformation piece, making the Marine, and the third piece as an installation commander. So I'm going to keep my remarks on 3 themes that hopefully we can tease out during the Q&A piece. So the first one would be talk about structure. The second one, we'll talk a little bit about combat, and the last one about the individual Marine. When we talk about structure, I think everybody realizes in late December, especially the Navy and Marine Corps team, late December 2010, the Commandant put together a small task force to look at post-Iraq, Afghanistan, and what America's expeditionary force is going to be doing for her nation. And when we did this, under the construct that we use for force structuring, the Marine Air Ground Task Force, we looked at a balanced air-ground logistics team that would be forward deployed, forward engaged, shaping, training, deterring, and if required, responding to crisis of all manners. When we looked at this, it was a capabilities-based assessment in order to make sure that we were postured and organized correctly for whatever came next. When you talk about tooth-to-tail ratio, there's 2 aspects of it. There's the aspect that we align our organization between the operating forces and the supporting establishment. The operating forces make up about 2/3 of our total structure. Right now, currently active duty is about 202K, and our reserve structure is roughly about 40K. About 2/3 of our force structure is the operational force. The remaining, when we say supporting this establishment, we're talking about what we call T2P2, which is training, transients, patients, and prisoners. And obviously the prisoners piece is a very small part of that. The largest piece of that is the training piece. For instance, in my entry-level pipeline of Marines coming in, assessing every year, that's roughly about 34,000 a year. And of those individuals that come in, only 1/3 will stay for their second tour. So we look at it from that perspective, and it's very important, because when you look at the piece that all of us do, you fight as you train, the entry-level pipeline, to your primary MOS, military occupational skills, and then to your small unit collective training, and all the stuff we do prior to deployment that's required both by the combatant commander that we provide forces to, as well as the mission on the ground. That's a very huge piece, and technology plays a lot into in our preparedness and the success we've had over the last decade. The other aspect of it is when you're actually, the operational forces out there are broken out into 3 categories. Traditionally, the combat support, and combat service support. So when you talk about tooth-to-tail ratio in the operating forces and those currently in Helmand Valley with the MAGTF that's out there right now, it's about depending on where you are, but generally speaking, it's about a 1/4 tail to 3/4 tooth out there to prosecute operations. So that's the perspective on the force construct, and we can talk a little bit more about what was reported out to the Secretary of Defense, and obviously because of the new guidance coming out there, unlike my counterparts here on the table, we actually grew during the last 10 years because the dwell time and the requirement for what we were doing in Afghanistan, Iraq, as well as our normal presence that we were doing in other theaters as well too. And we had every intent to draw down post-Afghanistan, because I think everyone realizes the largest part of our budget, over 57%, is toward personnel. And we want to make sure we modernize and prepare ourselves for the next decade or into the rest of the century. So that was that piece there. So you've got the supporting establishment and the operating forces, and then you got the what we say is CS, combat CS, CSS. The other aspect I want to talk a little bit about is combat and what we're doing right now. I had the privilege of going in right after 9/11 with Task Force 58 when we composited 2 Marine Expeditionary Forces and went inland off the coast of Pakistan, 400 miles in a landlocked country. And obviously we've had sustained operations ashore in Afghanistan. My most recent tour was 2009 to 2010 as a Regional Corps Advisor Command, where I had all the embedded training team members in RC East, Regional Command East, similar to Ward. We had 11 provinces there. 201st Corps was the first and most developed corps. Elements of the 215th that are down there with the Marines in Helmand in Nimruz province were birthed from 201st Corps. So I had the perspective to see when you talk about, we thought in combat, post Desert Storm, General Kulak, our 31st Commandant, who was clearly a visionary, he said the future is not the son of Desert Storm, Desert Shield. The future is the stepchild of Chechnya. Well, we all realized when we went into Iraq in the early part of 2000, it was similar. It was conventional, large-scale operations. And then as we refocused back onto Afghanistan, because of the topography and the distances, it's a quite different fight, and the tooth-to-tail ratios to support those type of operations, especially when you're looking at kill and capture, not only from a special operations high-value target, but the things that lead you to that from a trigger man or a sniper shot, based on biometrics and all the other things that from the bottom-up intelligence is gathered by the Marine on the ground there. So that's from the combat piece. And then the third piece you'll have to understand from our mentality and our culture is the individual Marine. I tell you, 40 to 45 weeks a year on Friday, I see the transformation, the graduation. That in itself is pretty inspiring of how we continue to serve our Corps with the great young Americans that volunteer. But one thing that sets us apart from any other service in any other nation is that every Marine is a rifleman first and foremost. So when you take that and you look at it from the construct of tooth to tail, and you go to a Lance Corporal who may be a truck driver or a logistician, and you ask him if he's a warfighter or if he's a support element, he's going to tell you he's a warfighter because it's not what they do, it's who they are. And that's how we looked at our capabilities-based organization as we look forward to see what the future holds, because I don't think we've been very good at predicting the future. And that is something that we've looked at internal to the Marine Corps, an organization that has been well steeped in history and known for innovation and forward thinking. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, General. So we're teed up here from all warfare areas and from all different ways to slice and dice the budgetary issues. So I'd like to open it up to questions. Time is flying by here. We only got about 20 minutes left. Yes, you there, sir.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
My question is, with this whole topic, is we know about the tooth to tail. We certainly know that we've been at this efficiencies piece pretty hard in the Department of the Navy for about 12 to 13 years. But in terms of what keeps you up at night, this is what keeps me up at night, that we can get very efficient and get through the less taxing, somewhat permissive environment that we're in today and make decisions that will optimize military manpower. But then when we need the warfighter of the future, we're going to find that at an expense very close to what we could have bought that warfighter for the future, we bought a guy in jeans with gym shoes and a ponytail who was support from the rear. And my question for the panel is, are we looking at it correctly? Should we be pushing more, not less people out in our ships, in our squadrons, in our submarines, in our Marine units, so that we can build that reserve for the future?
So when you say pushing out, you mean send them home? What do you mean by
no,
pushing out?
I mean crew the ships
You make
more
more
robustly.
tooth and less tail. Is that
Right.
Okay.
Make more tooth
Okay.
to deal with the uncertainty of the future.
Well, Admiral Hunt, you want to take that? That sort of speaks to what you were talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. I think that's exactly where I was trying to go. I think the key is to make sure that we have the right warfighting capability at sea, and that's why I go to the optimal manning. That's why I take a look at, are we giving the right folks the enriching seashore rotation so that they go back to sea more prepared than when they rolled ashore in the first place. We've got to get the numbers right. We've got to focus on the people. We've got to focus on the depth of training. I worry a lot, much like you just articulated, on our ability, our resilience, the ability to sustain a war fight at sea against an adversary that's trying to deny the things that we've become reliant upon because we haven't really fought that challenging adversary at sea. So do we have the right training? Do we have the right sparing? Do we have the knowledge to exist without reach back to do the kinds of things that we've done throughout the history of our Navy? And that means that we have to put people first. We have to get the right numbers, the right skill set, the right training, and then we have to back it up with that, at least the direct line of shore support. So again, it's the maintenance community, it's the training community, not only the RMCs locally, but Great Lakes, the schoolhouses that we have there, and put that package together holistically and do it the right way, and we'll be able to survive the ups and downs of the budget challenges that we experience over the next decade. But the thing that we cannot recreate is that professional sailor who is innovative, adaptive, and has got the skill set to deal with that uncertain environment.
Let me ask Admiral Myers to jump in here from a brown shoes perspective. I remember the early 90s when some year groups were sent home, you know, to answer the short-term manpower reductions, and we gutted or created the bell curve there that suffered when those year groups came up for department and we realized we were really short. So are there any things in place to make sure we don't do that this go-around?
Absolutely, and I think I'm up to 3 questions, because you had 2. You asked about what keeps us up at night, and then you also asked about manpower, and now I've got your
Okay,
question.
so you have to answer just one of those.
Okay, I'm going to start. I'm going to start with Admiral Daly's. What keeps me up at night is when you look at the future, we need to make sure that we reconcile the budget with the strategy. And I think that that's something that's happening. That's something that, as the budget is unfolded in the next few weeks, that'll become a lot clearer. But what makes it challenging is we have a pretty aggressive demand for our forces overseas. Now, we're a nation that is still in Afghanistan, and as long as the Middle East is going to be as turbulent and violent as it is right now, and there's going to be a demand for our forces. And so that demand for our forces highlights some of our manpower challenges. Now, speaking for aviation, I'll say that we have enough people. We have enough people in the Navy, but we don't have enough people in the fleet. So the issue is that we need to distribute or redistribute the people that we have. And the way we get to that is we change policy. And the policy for manpower and those discussions and the ability to change those policies is happening right now. And we expect that we're going to see some benefits or the results of those discussions probably in the summertime. All right, you had a question. You want to know if we've...
Well, I mean,
if we're gonna be
I think
okay.
it's a different part of the same question, which is as you shift your priorities from tail to tooth in terms of manning, you know, there are winners and losers in the ratings. You know, where's the bar for P&A and where's the bar for people augmenting or being told to go home in order to meet this manpower bogey that's already out there. So are we doing anything to make sure we don't relearn the lessons of the 90s when we realized for some year groups that we'd gutted them?
Absolutely. And the reason that you can rest assured that we're not going to make the mistakes of the 90s is because the decision makers experience that. I mean, we were there, and we're absolutely not going to let that happen again.
Okay. Yeah, yes, sir, General, go ahead.
When we're talking about what keeps you up at night, from the perspective of the Marine Corps, I honestly believe, and I think the General Officer Corps and leadership of the Marine Corps believe, this is the era of naval forces. It really is. When you talk about a multi-domain, multi-dimensional force, with the return on investment because of the fiscal deficits we have right now. Whether we like it or not, we're a maritime nation with global responsibilities, and we have treaties and alliances, and we need global access because of the economy. And so what keeps me up at night is that we get so entrenched about the fiscal dire straits that we're in right now, and that we take for granted some of the capabilities that we've honed over the last 10 years. And I understand, as we've postured like we should have been all along as far as Asia, and I think the Navy and Marine Corps team never lost that focus. We just didn't have enough capacity to do everything. That we need to maintain some kind of forward presence, not just on a rotational basis, not on an episodic, but a persistent presence in certain areas in that part of the world. At the same time frame, when we went through our force structure review, we looked at, number one, manning. We had the forces out there and we had flags, but they weren't up at 100%. And what we did was, part of our force structure review is man those forces at the tip of the spear, both the warfighter and the support, at 100%. We were trying to get them up to 100% to 90, down to 95, when traditionally we were down in the low 90s or 80s. At the same time frame, we wanted to make sure that we are still deployed in other areas where there's a requirement for us to be out there, because the combatant commanders want naval forces to support the theater security cooperation plans. And so I'm hoping that as we look through and we get to the bottom line of what each organization within the Department of Defense contributes to the future of our national security, that we don't get so myopic about not being forward deployed, forward presence with the Navy Marine Corps team.
You, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Sergeant Erickson. I'm a current communications Marine with 1st Marine Logistics Group, formerly a member of ETT 1 TAC 10, mentoring the 2nd Canadac 3rd Brigade of the 201st Corps. Having been a combat Marine and now being a combat service support Marine, I understand that in the future, with the restructuring, it's going to be required of us combat service support Marines to do more with fewer Marines. And I know that I can. If I had, my platoon currently is 15 Marines. If I had 10 Marines that were as good as my best 5, I would be able to accomplish the mission that my current 15 are doing. My question is, in the future, are we going to, or are we currently assessing whether or not we can increase our recruiting standards to recruit the better young men and women out there to become those better Marines?
That's a great question. General, this one's obviously for you.
Yeah. I will tell you, when you look at our recruiting numbers across the services, they're all great. But it's particularly for the Marine Corps, we're getting almost 100% high school graduates when the standard is 95. Our self-imposed standard is 95. The standard is 90. But we have close to 99% high school grads, 75% that are in the category 1 to 3 alpha, very few waivers, a lot of college graduates. This last class, we had 10 individuals graduating with college degrees, some from schools like Yale and University of California. So you're getting the quality there. It's all about the supporting establishment, the entry-level pipeline, and getting to your MOS school. I would hate to work for you right now. No, the reason I say that, I would hate to be a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps right now. When I came in, it was the tail end of Vietnam, and we had a peacetime Marine Corps. We did a couple non-combatant evacuations if you're fortunate enough to be forward deployed on MU to participate in there. We had Desert Shield, Desert Storm that came through, which really was a a shortened live fire combined arms exercise for us. But now you have individuals like yourself with very high expectations, with multiple deployments. So if you're a lieutenant standing in front of a platoon of individuals like yourself, or worse yet, a young Marine that's got to assimilate and come in there, it's tough. But that's a great reflection of the caliber of individuals we have in our force right now. And it's going to be tough for us. People think cutting 20,000 Marines, roughly around there, is going to be easy. It's going to be hard. So I think, to answer your question, what needs to happen is you, as a small unit leader, are going to take these individuals because they've proven they've got the capacity. It's your development and employing them where they're best suited, and that's where it really comes down to.
All right, sir. Thank you, General.
Yeah, and just from a pan-service sort of comment on that point, again, these are the lessons of the 90s. One of the good outcomes of downsizing when the standards go up for either PNA or accessions or department-headed screen or command screen, when you're doing the same with fewer, those left behind do more, but also the quality of those left behind is higher. So the only thing you have to attend to, if this equation is out there, is the care and feeding, make sure that the op tempo is not too high and you burn everybody out, because we saw that lesson too. So again, like Admiral Myers said, leadership lived through those times, and we who sit on the sidelines now can only hope that they make sure that that doesn't happen again. You, please, ma'am. Can we get her mic turned on? Well, let me ask Admiral Breckenridge to... Purple haze. Let me ask Admiral Breckenridge to tackle that one, since he deals with probably the most educated accession group.
Well, it's a great question. And, I think in the undersea forces, from an enlisted rating perspective, we have that about right for the current roles and missions that we have as an undersea force. But as we look to the future of non-kinetic, non-lethal types of disruptive, exploitive influence, as we look at cyber warfare, other tricky things we do short of exploding things, do we have that right talent on board, and what are we going to do? How are we going to go ahead and do that in a small and elite force that's limited by a number of bunks on board a submarine? So that's part of the process ahead as we look towards this this change. The other one that I'll discuss very briefly is our officer corps, and we've taken sort of great pride to sort of train homogenously officers between SSBNs, attack submarines, Virginia class, Los Angeles, I don't care. As we continue to neck down, as I described, there's going to be a need for us to have more specialization within the officer corps and the undersea forces. And as that mission set grows beyond just sort of our 4 staple traditional missions, we're not going to be able to go ahead and embark the special team that's going to come aboard to provide us our new capability. We're going to have to figure out a way of how we develop that indigenously, both in our enlisted ranks and our officer ranks as well. So, we have it about right today, but as we look ahead about 10 years, there's going to have to be some shifts. Last point on personnel, and it gets to Admiral Daly's comment, is as we come down from 91 submarine crews to 60, we're going to have a manpower surplus that we're going to have to use very wisely to go ahead and try to get more teeth, more forward on-station time of our platform. I'm not necessarily talking about dual crewing, but I'm talking about strategically leveraging, that manpower force to force multiply, with the platform limitations that we have. Very last point is the unmanned aspect. The need for unmanned undersea vehicles and unattended sensors in the future is going to become even that much more dire. And the cadre that's going to operate those is going to require special training that hasn't been in our portfolio to date. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Jim Taylor, and my question is for Vice Admiral Hunt. I've read that there's been some discussion of revisiting C-swap for surface combatants, and I wondered if in fact we did that in the future, what would your feeling be about the tail being able to support that process? I know the tests we did in the past had some real struggles to them, and the mine force has also been a challenge.
Yeah, it's a great question, and as many of the members have articulated here, we are taking a look at kind of that A sub O, what it takes to get operational forces forward. You know, I would offer that Admiral Greenert at SNA here a couple weeks ago teed that up as an idea, not to say we're necessarily going that way, but that we need to put everything on the table and explore the goods and bads and the challenges in there, and are there ways to improve it. So I don't necessarily see us immediately jumping into that you know, swimming pool, but I do see us taking a look at across the board to include our new classes of ships. So as we roll in LCS, for example, with a 3-2-1 construct, is that right? Does it need to be blue gold? Do we do different ratios in different places depending on what the mission is? And so I really think it's not direction. It's the guidance to take a look at all those things, to go back and take a look at the lessons learned that we have in the late 90s and into the last decade. And we're doing that right now. We're taking a good, hard, close look at it.
Scott, go ahead. Let's tackle that one.
Okay.
It warms up.
Okay.
Oh, the sound guys, go back to the soundboard.
The answer is yes.
Ever get that? Yes.
I have the confidence that OSD leadership understands the difference, but that doesn't keep us from collectively looking for efficiencies. And I think when you look at each budget cycle, there's always a desire to come up with new ways of being more efficient, and I think that's okay. I think that's something that we need to do because the landscape changes and we have a strategy. We're getting ready to roll out a budget, and I think that we should continue to look at efficiencies across the services, between the services, just like Naval Aviation is doing within the aviation for the Navy and Marine Corps.
Just a quick follow-up. It's there, but as you point out, it's a big challenge, and you know, this sort of homogenization that we've seen, you know, with the jointness, with trying to do, you know, better across the combined forces, you know, with that comes a little bit of weakening of military unique capability. And again, you know, I see that in the undersea forces, is slowly over time, the last decade and a half, operating in a fairly benign, uncontested environment in the undersea domain. We have slowly traded off unique military capabilities that guard our stealth, which is our unique military advantage. We fall in with the high communication requirements with internet protocol, HD, the command and control aspect of phoning home and having so much intrusive involvement in the decision making of what we need to have as a decentralized command has slowly over time eroded our capability of providing what we uniquely provide as an undersea force. And now in the realm of A2AD, where that kind of stealth is going to be highly valued again as we go behind enemy lines to be disruptive and impose cost and risk on the adversary, we're going to have to get back to, even though it may not be efficient, even though it may not save money, we have to, hearken back to that military unique advantage that we have and not compromise that, for other grander, cost efficiencies. So it's going to be a continual struggle. I think you're starting to see some awareness and recognition of that, and there's a self-correction that's in progress.
Going to have to be our last question. You, sir.
I've got a question about the nimbleness of our force and how we use technology. I want to direct the question first to Admiral Myers because my background's an aviation background. I was always very proud of being in naval aviation because when we showed up, the bad guys, always the feedback that we got was they were afraid of us for two reasons. We were really professional and they could never tell what we were going to do. Today, we seem to be struggling mightily with giving our aviators and our other warfighters the tools they need to be truly nimble on the battlefield. And I'm talking about the types of tools that we see every day in our lives right now with advanced networks and software. And our reaction time to their great ideas is in years and sometimes decades when the world that they live in reacts in days and months. Do we have a problem? And if so, how can we address it?
All right, thanks for the question. Waiting for this thing to come up. All right. I think your question is touching on a bigger issue, which is acquisition and getting the right assets to the warfighter as quickly as we can. If I can paraphrase, if I get that wrong, just tell me. So I think that the question, and this came up yesterday at the keynote speakers Q&A, when it comes to can we get the technology that's incredible that's coming out in the speed of new ideas and innovation, how fast can we get that to the warfighter? And we have an acquisition process. OSD 5000, the Defense Acquisition Workforce Improvement Act. And those of you that have to work within the confines of that know that it's, let's just say it's very deliberate, okay? But that's something that I know that within the Department of Defense we recognize that we need to be more adaptive. And there are ways of getting combat demonstrations, urgent operational needs. There's ways that we can get some of that technology quickly to the warfighter. But what we don't want to do is put ourselves in a position where we have stuff that isn't tested or stuff that I can't network with the rest of the force. And that's where the operational commander needs to exercise good judgment. If it's something that we think will benefit the combat situation today, then they need to so state. But if it's something that we think is going to stay in the force, then we need to make sure that we can integrate it. We need to make sure that we can sustain it. And that's something that we spend a lot of time focused on, is not just getting something quickly out to the fleet, but how do I train to it and how do I sustain it?
So that's going to have to do it for this panel. Thank you for your attendance. This has been a real gift to have these gentlemen assembled on this important topic. Obviously, and as a veteran and a Navy retiree, I'm impressed by the sanguine tone over the last 2 days, and now it's time, once the budget actually comes out and that sort of thing, There will be winners and losers and challenges, and again, I'm confident that the leadership, like those gathered in front of you, will do the right thing. So thank you. Paul, I don't know if you have some finishing comments?
Ward, I would just like to follow up by also thanking our distinguished panel for taking part this morning, and it was a very enlightening discussion, giving us a lot to think about. It's nice to know, you know, I get the sense that we've got our arms a bit around this, but a lot of challenges remain, and especially sobering to think about those challenges being faced by succeeding generations of officers, as Admiral Breckenridge pointed out. So they'll have their plates full, I suspect. Please join me again in thanking our panel this morning.